It's quite a week. Quite a week
Yeah,
this week.
there's some pretty sad news in
Yeah,
wrestling.
I
Just came out this
struggled with
afternoon.
this. I struggled with this because, this is Zen in the art of watching wrestling.
Hmm.
So it's supposed to be like the good stuff, the
Yeah.
fun stuff. And this is a definite bummer.
Well, it's a definite bummer, but it is a chance to sort of celebrate his life and career, so you
Hmm.
can, I mean, death, it comes for all of us,
True.
but, you
True.
know, Terry got to live a long life and well, yeah, a long life.
Yeah,
And,
okay, first of all, he got to live a long life like for a normal person.
yeah,
How old was he? Sorry, I missed
he
you
was, he
saying.
was, he was 79. So,
79.
you know,
Second of all, for those of us who followed Terry Funk's career, he
yeah.
had no business living that long at
Oh,
all.
no.
Uh,
Uh,
and and thirdly, for a professional wrestler, 79 is like 208. So congrats to Terry all around and a
when
well-deserved rest.
Yes, exactly. A well deserved rest for sure. Um, it was interesting. Like I was looking through just before we started, like what are some of the top matches of Terry Funk's career and things like that. And I realized like he was born in 1944. He won the NWA championship in 1975. So his peak athletic years, he's
Mm-hmm.
touring around with the NWA world title. But a lot of like his peak athletic years are kind of lost to history a little bit. He
Mm-hmm.
started in, I think it was 1966. He's NWA champion in the mid 70s, but that was before there's much of a tape library built up. Like you'll get some matches that were taped.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see some matches from the 60s, some from the 70s. There's some stuff on
Yeah.
YouTube of him in All Japan in the 70s, but for the most part, like you don't get to a stage where every match is filmed and can be viewed by everyone until you're in the early to mid 80s, really.
Yeah.
And so I just thought about like how many great Terry Funk matches are sort of lost to history because his peak period comes from before everything was being filmed. But I
Yeah.
looked like his top. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and to think that like we saw that the generations of the eras of wrestling that he worked through. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was still taking matches like 5, 10 years ago.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was still taking matches like really late in his life. And so much of his career like took place after he was in his mid 40s. Like I
Yeah.
was
The
looking at
really
at his
hardcore stuff too.
yeah, and that was oh no, the really hardcore stuff, he's in his 50s by that.
Yeah.
His but his top rated match of his career, like the consensus is from like Dave Meltzer, cagematch.net, like places that rank matches. The top match of his career was the I Quit match versus Ric Flair in 1989 at Clash of the Champions.
Mhm.
And he was 45 years old when that
Yeah.
that match took place, and so it's like, oh man, like if he's doing those kinds of matches at 45, like I wish we could see
Mm.
him at 25, but the stuff from the early 70s, late 60s, you don't get to see as much. But the
Also,
hardcore stuff,
I don't like how close I am to 45 and have never won a world championship.
well, okay, so I was looking at another one of his matches is very highly rated. And so if you're looking like if you're you heard the news about Terry Funk and you're looking for matches to watch, definitely any of his matches with Ric Flair in 1989
Mhm.
are very good. And just consider that he's late stage Tom Brady in the NFL at that point. Like he's 45 and he won a Super Bowl
And
basically.
no one knows how.
Yeah. um, but yeah, so definitely anything with Ric Flair in 1989. But then you get to the mid 90s and he goes out to Japan where deathmatch wrestling becomes a
Mhm.
real thing. He had a no ropes barbed wire match with Cactus Jack in
Mhm.
Japan, and he was 51 years old. 51 years
Yeah.
old when he did those matches with Cactus Jack in Japan. And I mean, I think I kind of like knew like, but
Mhm.
being past 50, especially like in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like in the
Oh, yeah.
90s, if you were past 40, you were done as an athlete. If you were past 50, like
And if you
it wasn't
lived that
even
long.
considered. Yeah, yes, exactly. And so he was doing those death matches when he was in his early 50s. He did the entirety of the Monday Night Wars. And he was either with ECW, WWF, or WCW throughout the entire Monday Night Wars. And he was already in his 50s when those started. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the idea of him as like the hardcore icon. I do wonder, that stuff, the deathmatch stuff, you and I, people of our age who are fans for a long time, we've all seen that footage so much that it's almost desensitized us to it.
Yeah.
But like, I wonder how much is known about that stuff to newer fans these days.
Yeah, I mean, deathmatch wrestling, like
Yeah.
for a period in the 90s, especially when ECW came around,
Yeah.
like hardcore wrestling, deathmatch wrestling, it was really, really popular. It's not really that now. I think the more we know about the actual physical impacts of this stuff, the less we sort of celebrate the unnecessarily damaging type stuff in wrestling, right? Like it's the same thing. Like if you see a match now and somebody does an unprotected chair shot, there's a significant percentage of the audience that'll go, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case in the mid 90s. We wanted to see all of it. Set yourself on fire, roll around in glass. Awesome
Thumbtacks,
stuff.
Legos, whatever you got.
Yeah. Now it's still around. Like GCW does a lot of deathmatch wrestling with like Nick Gage, and they do light tubes, everything. It's around, but it's not as popular now as it was then. Like ECW was a huge deal. Deathmatch wrestling in Japan was a huge deal. It's not, it's way more niche now. Well, I mean, it was still niche then, but it's more niche now.
Yeah, I guess it's just because once WWE kind of adopted the quasi hardcore style, which was really just the hardcore style, slightly safer, and I mean very slightly safer. Once they sort of adopted that and made it sort of mainstream, if you will, to give it that parlance, I think we just got used to it.
Yeah.
And it
well,
kind of,
definitely
in a way, in a tiny way, it kind of became like The Walking Dead, where one day you're sitting there and you watch it and you realize, I'm just watching this to see who dies. I don't care about anything else. That's not a good attitude to have when watching a TV show. You sit there watching wrestling being like, I wonder who's going to like almost bleed to death tonight for my entertainment. Like, that's just not a great mentality to have. So I think it waned after a while when people are kind of like you say, I don't know if I want to see that.
All right. Before technical difficulties, what was I saying? Terry Funk is awesome.
Terry Funk is awesome. Hardcore wrestling was cool then, but kind of uncomfortable now. And Terry Funk continued to be awesome. Boy, I wish we could have watched more Terry Funk.
That was pretty much it. If you're looking for Terry Funk matches to watch, definitely anything with Ric Flair in 1989 was very, very good. That was actually a cool period for WCW, or well, actually, I think it was still NWA at that time. It was they had the Flair Steamboat trilogy. And then right when the Flair Steamboat trilogy ends, like as soon as the last match was over, Terry Funk came out to congratulate Flair, but ended up pile driving him through a table. And that was at a time where you didn't expect people to go through a table. And you're like, what are they doing standing on top of that table? Oh my God, it broke. Like it was new.
It was a thing.
Like that was years before Sabu was doing it in every match, right? Or the Dudleys.
It was years before
ECW.
like the leg drop was a finisher. So
yeah. So those were great. And then anything that he did in All Japan Pro Wrestling in like the 80s was super good. And then of course, he was there for the whole Monday Night War. He was in his 50s for it. But if you're ever feeling like you want to feel like you're not getting that old, watch Terry Funk in the 90s. Man, that guy, he was in his 50s and doing crazy things.
There was one match he had on Raw with Mick Foley. It was a big thing because Mick Foley was quitting the company. This is the first match he'd ever wrestled as just Mick Foley, no persona.
I know exactly the one you're talking about. It was a number one contenders match.
Yeah, against Terry Funk. and Terry Funk did a moonsault off
Yes.
the top of the ring, off the top of the post, onto the guardrail. Like he completely missed and
Hmm.
hit the guardrail with his hip. And this wasn't like the soft padded formed
No,
guardrails
no,
they
no, no.
have now. This
Yeah.
was just when they used, a steel fence that they found lying around.
Hmm.
And I thought he was dead. Like he just took that hit, and I was like, "Oh God, this is the end." But no, he bounced up, finished the match.
I
Unbelievable.
absolutely remember that match. It was the main event of a Raw. I believe it was 1998. It was right after Austin had won the title, and they were building
Mhm.
up Mick Foley as his big challenger. But Mick Foley as the evil dude Love, who
Yeah.
Vince McMahon wants to make sort of the corporate champion. So yeah, I remember exactly that match was fantastic. And just like a couple of months maybe before that was the dumpster match at WrestleMania
Oh
14.
my God.
Him and Cactus Jack versus the New Age Outlaws. Gotta be
Yeah.
one of my favorite WrestleMania matches of all time
Now,
was that
was that
match.
the match? Was that the
Hmm.
match, or was it a match leading up to that match or after that match? Where they, I think it was a dumpster match again. They were sent to the hospital,
No,
and
that was
then they escaped from the hospital and came back, and like Cactus Jack was wheeling his IV, and Chainsaw Charlie was in his like thing from the hospital. Oh, I
yeah.
thought that was that was the first time I looked at wrestling and was like, I don't know if this is on the level.
That was a classic episode of Raw. So early 1998, like in the build up to WrestleMania, so probably like March somewhere around there.
Mm,
And it was classic. So they were brawling with the New Age Outlaws. New Age Outlaws put them in a dumpster, shoved the dumpster off the ramp. Um,
yes.
and it was like this big show long story where like they were blurring the lines between storyline
Yeah.
and real, and you had like Sonny. Oh God, Sonny. Um, Sonny.
Wow. I mean, I agree, but wow.
Yes, Sonny was out there and she like full on crying, like doing
Mm,
a fantastic performance. Like people were acting like this was like this horrible tragedy. Then later on in the main event, DX is in the main event or something, and Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie have escaped from the hospital, and they run down the ramp, and I think one of them still had their IV,
yeah,
like you
yeah.
said, and was rolling. I can't remember which one. And oh my god, I remember thinking that was just fantastic. Like the
Mhm.
entire show had been like, this is so tragic, and then right
Yeah.
at the end, like,
They just showed
oh my
up.
god, I loved it. You know
I
what?
need
I'm
the
gonna watch.
making of, yeah, documentary on that one.
Okay, so if you're watching Terry Funk matches, 1989 versus Ric Flair, 1995 death matches with Cactus Jack,
Mhm.
the whole feud with the New Age Outlaws leading up to the dumpster match. That should give you a good start. And anything you can find from the 70s and 80s.
I think he was also the sheriff in WCW for a few
He
months,
was. He
because
was. He
in
did the
WCW
entire.
in the late 90s and early 2000s, anyone who came in new was just automatically the sheriff. So,
He was Vince Russo era WCW. I think he was there right up into the closing too. Yeah, Vince Russo brought him in. He was the commissioner of WCW.
mhm.
I remember he wrestled. I believe he wrestled Bret Hart in a world title match at one point, but I think Bret was concussed at that time. It was
Mhm.
sort of near the end of his career. Um, but yeah, Terry Funk did the entire Monday Night Wars right up to the end.
It's amazing.